So I'm going to be talking about something really mundane, very down to earth, not at all very high funda philosophy or very abstract. I teach design, and this is a presentation which I have been gradually refining for the last 4-5 years, and I show it to both my students and my faculty. And these have been my concerns about design since I have been dealing with architecture, with products, with craft, and so on. So I'm going to talk about the real versus the symbolic aspect of design. What do I call real? This is the production of the ikat fabric. And Jui talked about materiality and how materiality expresses in design. The production of the fabric actually results in because it's the intrinsic structure of the fabric. You tie and dye each and every thread, tie bundles, and you put a warp and weft, and the resultant pattern that you get is intrinsic to the structure of the fabric itself. I call this real design. Of course, I'm being very provocative here, because I wanted a healthy discussion after this. Okay, I call this symbolic. This is screen printed ikat. So the same pattern which belongs to some other technique has been completely superimposed on another kind of, fabric. So it symbolizes ikat, is not real ikat. And I feel that this sensibility of design we'll slowly talk about it, is not only restricted to textiles. This you'll find in products, you'll find in architecture, urban design. So these are like two completely different sensibilities of design. And I'm not condemning one or celebrating another. I'm just saying that these things exist. And we'll see how this works. Across time, that is from history, across very different regions, across many design disciplines, these two approaches seem to exist. I would call this real. When the jeans were first invented, they were meant to last. So the ad actually shows that, it can't be torn apart by horses. They use rivets to reinforce the joints further. And the fabric that they choose, the dye, everything was part of the actual functioning of the garment. Gradually, jeans started symbolizing youth and rebellion. When jeans were designed, there was no wrist watches. You had to carry your own pocket watches. There was a special pocket meant for that. That pocket is still going on now, although it's found new uses. People would keep coins in them, maybe, I don't know, keys. But the fact that jeans were so comfortable and they were so long lasting and they would get frayed and over the years torn, that also became a symbol. And now people actually buy them, fray them, tear them, and you actually end up paying more for them, which I find really ironic. So this is a symbolic take on the jeans. Similarly, the jackets that, like for example, what I'm wearing, I discovered that the buttons here, they were designed to be folded up because there were people working in these jackets. There were army doctors who were performing surgeries in the middle of battlefields, so they had to roll up the sleeves. This has become totally stitched now. These are non-functional, but it's still carrying on as a symbol. And I also discovered that the number of buttons also now signifies how formal the jacket is. So if it's a single button to 4 buttons, gets more and more formal. So there are many such things in the field of Zoom. So I would like you to read this. Can anyone read this? Should I read it aloud? In a Zen monastery, when the master and his disciples began their evening meditation, the cat who lived in the monastery made such a noise that it distracted them. So the teacher ordered that the cat be tied up during the evening practice. Years later, when the teacher died, the cat continued to be tied up during the meditation session. And when the cat eventually died, another cat was brought to the monastery and tied up. Centuries later, learned descendants of the spiritual teacher wrote scholarly volumes about the religious significance of tying up a cat for meditation practice. So this is what is happening in the field of design, where the original purpose, the original intent, the original material, the original technique is being overlaid. Okay, let's move to objects. All of us know about the muda, the parasol, the basket weave, where form, structure, material, ornamentation, they all come together elegantly and they are integral to the design. Plastic handles made to look like bamboo. Laundry basket molded in plastic but trying to resemble a bamboo basket. The original Charles Eames chair, you know how it works, so beautifully designed. The top is molded around the body, the bottom has spindle-shaped legs so it doesn't buckle. You have cross bracing. This is molded furniture by Neil Kamal, and it's trying to imitate a much more expensive polished teak furniture. So it's aspirational. People can't buy real wood furniture, but they would like to still own, so they buy a plastic version of it. And that's supposed to be cane weaving. Totally out of proportion, of course. But this is a symbol. This is a kind of a iconic take on the teak wood furniture. I'm not very sure whether I should use the word iconic or symbolic, because all these things mean different things in different disciplines. So I'm still looking for a good word for it. Stone wall. All the joints have been gouged out, replaced with a rich mortar so that the joints are waterproof. So that the mortar joints follow the very construction and the bonding principle of the stone. You can actually see how it works. Now look at this. These are new stone walls which have been built all around the Buddha Jayanti Park. The old ones were torn down and new ones were built, I think about 4 or 5 years ago. And can you notice the pattern? Pattern is somewhere else, the joints are somewhere else. So to me, this is more like a symbol of a stone wall, which is being overlaid on the actual stone wall. If you go to Bhutan and Sikkim, Tibet, they have a particular way of spanning the lintels of a wall. Thank you. So because the walls are very thick and usually made of mud, and you don't get fat logs of wood, no trees grow there. So they have a very beautiful system of, does a pointer work in this? Okay, anyway. So as you can see here, you start with a window frame and then you put a single mirror over it and then you corbel out wooden pieces. So that supports the thickness of the wall on top. And this corbelling pieces made of small wood pieces, they actually became the ornamentation also. And you can see how the vernacular architecture actually uses structure as the ornament. Yeah. But soon, when this all died out and concrete came in, now you have these guys sitting and reproducing all these things in concrete. And they are molded in concrete and they are painstakingly, I mean, look at the kind of a mold that they need to make in order to reproduce it. Now, this is actually part of the national identity of Bhutan, that every building in Bhutan has to have these features. This is a traditional city of Pitigiliano, where there's a city which is kind of grown on a piece of rock, and the city more or less kind of has grown organically up from the rock in response to topography and social structure. This probably was a naturally existing water channel. So logically in vernacular settlements, you don't build where the water flows. So that also becomes the main drain. And everything just kind of revolves around that. And I find this fascinating, where architecture grows into the rock and the rock grows up into the city. A kind of an interpenetration of architecture and natural materials and the natural topography. I call this real. I call this a symbolic city, where there's an icon of a city which has been simply superimposed on a sheet of water. This is the Palm in Dubai. And actually, if you're living in the city, from the ant's point of view, you can't see this pattern. Yeah? This only makes sense when you see it from the air. So it's an icon which is only visible from the helicopter. So concluding with some theories. To me, there are these two realms of design. There is a real realm which uses reason, technique, purpose, rationale. And then there is the other realm, which is the symbolic, which deals with emotion, memory, association, culture. This deals with the why of design. That deals with the why not of design. And right in the middle is what if, which is where design is, which is right down the middle. If you go too much towards this, it becomes pure engineering. It loses its soul. Then towards that extreme, it becomes styling. Then it becomes pure art, totally subjective. And design is right down the middle again. So I feel that there is a method realm, and I'm being very provocative here. There is a madness realm. The madness is, I don't use it in a negative sense. It's not crazy. Madness is, according to one of the dictionary meanings, is a chaotic way of working, which I think is valid. It's not invalid. But I think what has been happening is design has been swinging between extremes. So pre-modern, when you had that wedding cake, Victorian kind of architecture, too much of madness. Then modernism came, extreme of method, where you totally lose touch with people, their aspirations, their memory, their culture, totally like blank slate, too much logic. And then you have DDA flats coming out of that, banal environments, totally uninspiring. And then you jump to the other extreme, then you have banquet halls which look like, Baroque palaces now in Delhi. So there's this kind of a polarity, and design has been swinging from one extreme to the other. So my question is that, can there be a middle path where we can design sensitively, celebrate material, celebrate artisans, celebrate craftsmanship, where we look at a thing and we know how it was produced. Therefore, we come in touch with the production. Like you mentioned, we are getting to a state we are getting more and more distanced from production, and everything is getting copy-paste, and anything can be reproduced in any material, any way. So there is a profusion of that. So the question is that, can we retain some of the richness which we have lost when we take this extreme, and yet retain the logic and the rationale? That is my question. Open to you.
The real and the symbolic. Could you place at 2 points, and something we were talking at over coffee, is that there's a tendency to think when we talk about an origin, that an origin has some fictional point.
Yeah.
And we somehow ideally dream
Yes.
of going back to that, whether it's in Italian hill town. The vernacular builders generally were also working in flux.
Yes.
So my question to you is this, because what you described is a liminal zone. The liminal zone between method and madness. We can use different words. You and I would agree. All of us would use different.
Yes.
It's fine. It's fine. But your point of going towards pure engineering or pure art is very interesting. How do these things loosen towards symbolism, as you pointed out, and saying, because you said also, if I remember, that it's not all bad. There's something. My question is, where is vitality in this? And just to put that into context, and you would have it in India, and I'd like you to respond to an Indian context. The writer George Steiner spoke about, in an essay called In Bluebeard's Castle, spoke about the vitality in the recreation of the Stare Maestro in Warsaw, when it was removed by the Germans. And they replaced it brick, stone by stone, brick by brick. Of course, it was a simulation. Later, we heard the word simulacrum. Later, it's another word. So, my point is, and Steiner's point was that there's vitality in what you would describe as the symbol. It would have been the symbolic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Can the vitality move across these fields continually? And is this the third space you're talking about in the middle? And is that that we need to learn to oscillate and test ourselves by not going too far that way, and also test ourselves going that way? So, in other words, the liminal zone, isn't that what we all actually exist in?
I think you pretty much answered it yourself. I really don't have much to say to it. I think the need for vitality is what is missing now. It's not a question of where does the vitality lie, but do we really feel the need for vitality anymore? I think that need is also being eroded. But that's also cyclical. So there is a loss of meaning, there is dilution, and after a point everyone starts saying, hey, what the hell is all this? We need to get back to meaning. And then we desperately try and find meaning through somewhere. And then by repeating it endlessly, it becomes a habitual pattern, it becomes part of culture, and then slowly it starts losing meaning again, and then again there is a questioning. So I think it's a cyclical historical process, and it's also a personal cycle that people go through.
But I suppose what you well described as that design actually is an occupation of this.
Yes. Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Let me attempt answering your question. Design is, is a microcosm which happens in life, which happens in the way, the environment we live in, and it follows the priorities, it follows the norms of what is present and where our aspirations go. As societies are changing, I think the design follows a pattern. It's a natural pattern. So in that sense, theorizing it, whether the real is the one or the symbolic is the one, that the end user doesn't see it that way. It sees it as something which is important to them at that point of time. And I would take an example in the case of how we lived 50, 100 years ago. It's a far more natural way of living, close to nature, the foods were more natural. Today, we have a lot of, they can be called symbolic foods in the same language.
Yeah.
But we moved, and that's become the kind of a norm.
Yeah.
And we see that norm shifting slowly. But that's coming again because of the way this pendulum moves.
Swinging, yes.
Pendulum is swinging. So there is a lot of nature the nature, the norms of society, the norms of, the what aspirations of people are
True.
into this. And there is no way. I think this is the flow which will happen in the normal course. And I think the correction will take place also as the bigger ecosystem changes. I think that's what I feel is would happen in design as well.
Well, somewhere I think designers have been in the forefront of they've been the custodians of taste, and they are seen as theoreticians who can think and create manifestos. So when modernism came, there was a big manifesto about it, and it caught the popular imagination. But then there was a point when people were totally rejecting modernism, and there's this famous picture of a big society, housing society being torn down because it became unlivable. And because modernism lost touch with people and their aspirations. And then this Las Vegas happened, and then postmodernism, and then this architect discovered that people were really reacting to symbols on the highway. And that architecture also was a symbol, was a billboard. Now, when you respond to a billboard, you're driving past at a fast speed. You really don't have time to really dwell. So instant theories, instant design, instant architecture, and then it's forgotten. It's just an image on Instagram, and after a while, all the images just start looking the same. There's no distinction, there's no differentiation, because you're just bombarded with images. The image precedes, like he mentioned, simulacra and simulacrum. So there was this French philosopher, Baudrillard. He said that in postmodern times, the image comes first, and there is no more the talk of the original. So we are living in those times. But as designers, I think we ought to question that, because I think it is leading to a certain erosion. Like Roger mentioned, where are all those theories? They're not being talked about in architecture colleges anymore. Where is Baths? There's a systematic erosion of all that, and things are being really diluted. And I'm very concerned about that. Yes.
And that's still be open to everyone to sort of answer. And something that I've been thinking of for some time, that across all disciplines of design, the new challenges that we as designers face is the access to information being very easy for the user, and hence clouding their thought process heavily. What with the WhatsApp forwards and Googling every medicine, it's the norm. And that, along with the sheer number of users that one is looking at, like where earlier, say, a piece of yarn would be made to make, say, 20 outfits within a smaller community. Now, within the smaller village which is supporting a craft, there is a much bigger demand that the farmer as well as the viewer is now addressing. So what are your thoughts on that impacting the symbolism that now has begun to replace the original thought? Because it's just crazy. When you go to a doctor, you've already Googled your disease, you've already Googled the medicine, and then the doctor, as their solution provider, has nothing to give you, which might seem original to you as a user.
What can I say? I think somebody said that there has been a death of expertise. So that is what has happened now. There are no experts left anymore because everyone is an expert. And all the information that you need to know is there on YouTube. So the question is, while it is terribly empowering, there is also a concern that, there is something called real expertise. So maybe there is something called symbolic expertise. I'm not sure.
As a teacher also, I guess, when students can Google the entire curriculum and, figure a large part of the content.
Oh, yeah.
The respect that they have, that, our generation of people probably have for teachers.
I'm facing that every day. I'm facing that every day. Yeah, exactly. So that teacher-student relationship, which was that sacred Guru-Sishya Parampara, is totally gone. Now you are a facilitator, you are a service provider, and students are consumers, and they want their money's worth. And there's a lot of paperwork you need to do in order to prove to them that they've got their money's worth. But I think the essence of the teacher now is to be able to guide them through the information, because there's a lot of crap out there. So the sense of discrimination, filtering is, I think, what I haven't cracked it yet. Still working on it.
Students, clients alike, I guess. It's a same time.
So I have a question.
Yes, please.
Because you speak about students becoming your clients or consumers. You've been in the education field for so long. How did that change happen? And why have teachers like you let it happen?
Look, I don't think it's entirely bad, because I have also taught in many architecture colleges where teachers get away with murder, where it's so teacher-centric that you come to the class, don't come to the class, whatever you say there's no accounting. So this system where there's a modicum of accountability for the teacher, there are learning outcomes, and you need to teach towards the learning outcomes. There is fair assessment, which is transparent, which generates a lot of unnecessary paperwork, but it is transparent. So I actually opted for this system because I found there was a lot of problems with the other system, where the teacher has some aloof genius who's a master, who's a quote-unquote a persona. It's gone. We really need to now learn with the students on the go.
So that's great that you should always keep learning.
Yeah.
Never going to stop. I'm just talking that to make, even use the word that they are consumers. Is it fair for us to call them consumers as academicians and as...
They're customers.
I mean, I'm just, it's, so I come from that school of thought where at least education, a student is a learner and will always be a learner. And
Yeah.
we as teachers or academicians or educators have to also take that responsibility of seeing that they are learners. And it's difficult for me to call my student a customer.
It's very difficult, and
that's why I'm asking.
the reason I don't mean to use the customers in a derogatory way. Customers in the sense they're paying, and everybody's paying the same. That's important. It's not that some geniuses in the class are paying much more than some other kids who are dull and disinterested. Everyone is paying the same, which means it is your job to ensure that even the weaker students develop some interest in the subject. So there's a sense of equality. Whereas in the earlier system, if you were a genius, you would do very well because you would get all the attention from the professors. So there's a sense of fair play which this is brought out, which I think I like.
Also, Julie, is it true that the kids learn only from the teachers in their environment anymore?
No, it's not.
So I think maybe they come not purely as seeking knowledge, but they come to interact in an active process where
Yeah.
I think maybe they don't therefore put you on that pedestal anymore.
Yeah. My only contention was, should we call them our customers?
Well, they're consumers of what
Like,
they're offering.
as the market...
That is the trend now.
Also, I guess
That's why
the word comes with the weight. You know, the word consumer comes with that weight of this paying person who's buying a commodity, and comes with a slightly negative.
Exactly.
Semiotically,
Yeah.
it sounds very negative.
Yeah.
But that was, that weight is also probably being shed because you are saying, all right, I want access to, I need to be able to access this level of teaching or this level of interaction, this level of growth over the next couple of years. That's my target. Now, how I go about it is, as someone who has the desire for this as a product. So that's why I become a consumer from that point of view, and that's a very positive connotation that one could give to the word now.
Also, I think there has been a generational change of learners. learners no longer just have this implicit faith in the teacher, and if the teacher tells them, you got to do for 3 days and do this activity. Earlier, in our generation, we had all the faith, and we'd say, okay, yeah, we'll sit and do it, and then we'd learn something from it. Nowadays, learners want to know in advance, what are they going to do, even if they spend 10 minutes, they want to know the end result first. So there has been a huge difference in the way students approach learning also. I don't know whether it is the same across rural, small town and urban, but at least in the urban sector where I have been operating, there has been a huge change in the attitude towards learning. Yeah. So I'm having to deal with that also. Yeah.
In continuation to that, I was just wondering why would some students do that? I think unfortunately, I think NID we kind of put that faith in our faculty, and they make us do strange things, and you kind of realize after 2 years,
Yes.
now that's helping.
So learning always happens in retrospect, isn't it?
I feel like maybe people sometimes there'll be that one odd person who get up like, why are we doing this? Like it seems so useless. Like why are you wasting our time? Like why can't we learn a software instead or something like that? I think that's because in our generation there's a lot of pressure to achieve a lot very quickly.
Yes.
So like we all get very stressed out about times we wasted. Not our own time where we wasted our time in a course, but if we feel like the faculty hasn't planned the course properly, and they are wasting our time, or they are not giving us enough assignments, or they're giving us too many assignments to learn properly, I think there's that pressure because everyone tells us that you just have these 3 years or 4 years, and young achievement is like a thing now.
30 under 30.
Yeah, like 25 under 25. Like, yeah, if you're not doing, like, I turned 23 recently and I like a loser. Yeah, like, have I done enough? Like, then obviously now I'm.
Yeah, I believe the midlife crisis has moved much forward.
It's like a quarter life crisis.
I had a couple of students ask me once, like in one school, I was taking a workshop on filmmaking, and I was thinking we have a really good discussion on the craft and storytelling. And the first question they're asking was that, do you make more money in a prequel or a sequel? How do I get out of your class right now and make those billions of dollars like Steven Spielberg does? And I was honestly taken aback with that question because here I was thinking, craft and everything, but the ambitions are a lot different. Right?
But I think Badri's, just to come around, I think he's right in terms of taking the shining dog.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate that story, I mean, I teach 17-year-olds. I teach a class of 200 every September fall in Canada. 200 first-year students in architecture. That's their very first class. And they're all across the world, Oriental, anywhere. And one of the things they do ask, and it's kind of scary, and it's kind of, the cold shower on you. They go to my teaching assistants and say, is there any way we can get around Professor Connor's class in the easy way? Could you give us the notes to how to do it so that we don't have to work very much? And my teaching assistant, we know that the question, so my teaching assistants have said, well, he doesn't actually run exams like you think, so I think you better turn up, otherwise you really won't. So this is kind of indicative. So coming back to the NAD students, and I was one who took them to the Valley roundabout, as Tony knows, and I said, go for it. And they probably thought, what the hell is this guy doing, making us sleep on a charcoal at midnight because it was too hot. But it didn't matter. Any experience in collaboration. So I think the change is on, and it's up to us to grapple with it.
So experiential learning, finally. You got to use that because that is the only thing which is transformative. None of these PPTs and notes and handouts, nothing works. It's got to be experiential. Oh.
the overlap area which you were talking of, I think that's really fantastic. And what Roger mentioned as vitality, it's there, I think, in both the areas, maybe in different experiential ways, qualitative ways. To me, the more important thing is that when we talk of the real that you were saying and the symbolic, the sense of time is very different in both. And it's this what makes all the difference when we talk of design today. I think we have lost complete sense of how to deal with time.
Yes.
It's this quickness that you were talking of. So in the traditional ways, there is this thing called longevity, where you flow with the time. And there is probably less of posing or stance making. In styling, there is a huge amount of posing and stance making where you actually think you can package time, which is, again, it's a very, you can debate and discuss, but one wonders which benefits more in terms of growth within.
It's fascinating that you say it. What I noticed is that the forms, there is a persistence of memory of form, which continues over a longer time period in people's memory. Technology changes much more fast.
Yeah.
But the form doesn't seem to keep pace with it.
Yes.
So the form is still lagging behind. Technology is changing quickly. So the new technology is still trying to reproduce the old forms, which is still there in culture, in memory. Yeah.
So quick changing might not necessarily mean vitality, which will really benefit.
Yes.
It seems like it will, but it probably doesn't. And that's where I think, as a design person, it'll be really fantastic if one works with that in mind, the sense of longevity.
Thank you.